Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for OUA football. Me and Tom are back on the mics, and if all things go according to plan, which often they don't when it comes to me and technology, for the first time live on YouTube, we are back to set up or to review, goodness gracious, it's going so great now, to review week 2 in the OUA. Tom, it seems like only yesterday I got to see your beautiful face, because it literally was yesterday. We were sitting at Varsity Stadium enjoying a lovely matchup between the GGs and the Blues that we'll get to shortly. You got to watch the other games this morning. How are you feeling coming off of week 2 in the OUA?
Man, talk about some fantastic football across the board. You know, the one game that we were really concerned about was Waterloo-York. And it ended up being really close throughout the entire game. We obviously had a chance to sit and be live at Toronto Stadium. Every time going to that stadium is always a fantastic experience. But to see a great game between Ottawa and Toronto, and Kinsale Phillip scoring late and potentially mounting a comeback and all of it, and going over everything else that we saw, or that I had a chance to see as well on OUA TV, man, what a weekend of football.
Yeah, it was a great schedule of games. Obviously, we weren't able to see all of them at the same time, able to catch up on some of them this morning. And you know what? I was going back through our takes, previewing week 2. And you know what? I'm going to give us a little pat on the back. Tom, pat yourself on the back. I thought we did a pretty good job on sort of projecting how we thought these games would go and some of the themes. And we'll obviously touch on those as we get into the games. But before we do, let's hand out a little hardware. Let's start with our players of the week. Tom, offensive player of the week. I'll give you first bite of the apple. Where are you going with this one?
Yeah, I think it once again has to go back to Evan Hillock. The kid goes 26 for 39, 388 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He played lights out in that game. McMaster really came out wanting to stop the run, and we'll talk about that obviously a little bit more into detail later on. But he was calm, cool, collected. He got hit a few times. He got sacked a few times, but I didn't feel like he was ever rattled. He found his guys. He just seemed really impressive. So my offensive player of the week's got to go back to Evan Hillock.
Yeah, and you mentioned, we'll talk about it more, Mac making the effort to slow down the run and some other kind of things that, I'm sure we'll touch on with Western that will be interesting to get to. Mm-hmm. Mac may have single-handedly ruined my MVP pick in Keon Edwards, because I don't know if he's ever rushed for less than 100 yards, let alone... Well, we'll get to that game when we get there. Yeah, Evan Hillock, and obviously when we made our MVP picks, I kind of explained how I'm the narrative guy and I like the Keon story and all these things. And meanwhile, there's another running back in Ottawa who's looking really frisky for maybe a dark horse MVP candidate. We'll see. But I kind of love the Evan Hillock MVP candidate story, where it's like he was just getting wrecked after that national semifinal loss. All these different things, and so far he's put up just staggering numbers. I'm going to go with a bit of an unconventional pick here, and I'm giving my offensive player of the week pick to Randall Beardy.
Ooh.
Tom Sterling. Who's Randall Beardy?
I believe he's an offensive lineman, if I remember correctly.
Former offensive lineman, currently the offensive line coach for our Windsor Lancers, because we'll get to that Guelph game in a few minutes, no doubt. But, the big story when we talked about, and we brought it up in the preview pod, going back to the 2022 game between these two clubs that was in Guelph, the breakout game for Isaiah Smith, the breakout game for Joey Zorn, and how Windsor had a net rushing total of, I think it was like 254 yards. Their net rushing, Tom, do you know what the number is? It's larger than 254. Let's go Price is Right rules. How many net yards did Windsor get this week? Price is Right rules.
Well, with the game that I watched, and I haven't been able to look, I didn't even look at the full stats, but man, with the game that I watched, I have to say plus, I'm going 550. I'm going over 550.
Okay, well, you know what? I love that. I love that you went that high. You went too high. Unfortunately, you won't be taking home any prizes here. Also, rest in peace, Bob Barker. 488 yards rushing, dude. And so,
that's
you know
just
what?
Rushing. I was going total yards.
Oh, no. Yeah, net rushing.
488 on the ground.
48 on the ground.
Oh, my God.
So, you know what? we'll certainly talk about Joey Zorn. We'll talk about Christopher John. We'll talk about Webge Mambo and my guy Liam Talbot as well when we get to that game. But I'm giving it to the offensive line, and as an extension, just because I don't actually know the 5 guys that were up there blocking, I'm giving it to the man drawing up those plays for them in Randall Beardy, former offensive lineman for the Windsor Lancers himself, I believe, and I think a stint in the CFL. Like in the, I don't want to get into too many of my thoughts on that game, but I think so far in the early returns from this season, on both offensive and defensive lines, I think Windsor has shown to be the dominant force in the trenches. But that's my offensive player of the week pick, an offensive line coach. What do you got there, Tom?
I love that so much. And actually, it's almost as if you and I are on the same page about this kind of stuff. I have the starting offensive line unit for the Windsor Lancers here.
God bless.
So at right tackle, Aaron Tongue, 6
foot. No, sorry. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry to cut you off. You have done play-by-play stuff. Let me get this with your at right tackle. I need this. Come on, Tom. Come on. I need this. The people watching and listening need this. Please, a little performance here.
Oh, your starting offensive line for these Windsor Lancers. Right tackle, Aaron Tongue, 6'4", 330 pounds of man. Right guard, Jackson Morkin, 6'3", 290 pounds. At center, the mayor of the middle, Justin Arnold, 6 foot, 285. His left guard, George Una, 6'3", 300 pounds. And that big left tackle that you can always depend on, Owen Mueller, 6'5", 285 pounds. Those are your starting Windsor Lancer offensive line unit.
And I can always depend on you to come through with the juice when we need it. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball, because I'm sure we will spend a lot of time talking about Windsor and waxing poetic about that running game and that offensive line when we get to that matchup. Defensive player of the week, Tom, who do you like?
Man, I got to go with the 18-year-old kid, and shout out to Mad Jack. He told it to us on our podcast, Ethan Grigorovich. Oh my goodness, this kid. He finishes with 8.5 total tackles, a forced fumble, and a pick. The kid's 18 years old in his second ever OUA game. Like, this is nuts. He's playing lights out, and yeah, I have to go with him.
Yeah, no, he's just, he looks like he belongs. He does belong, and I just love the way that Mad Jack set it up, where we had asked him, who's someone that we'll be talking about in a few years that we don't know about and haven't seen? He's like, no, here's who you're going to be talking about this year, and here we are, talking about him right now. Love the pick by Ethan, but I also love my pick, and of course the double entendre, the interception pick by Max Nixon, putting a bow on that game as well. Less than a minute to go in that game, and Mac maybe being able to put together the drive to, I guess it could be to win that game down 27-22. And man, I'm so excited to talk about that game. Keegan Hall, baby. And you obviously already talked about Evan Hillock. But Nixon, obviously, with, maybe the one mistake, very few mistakes, I guess, by Hall in that game, and one of which being the ball that wound up in Max Nixon's hands. And he did the rest of the work, taking it all the way back 4-6 to put an end on that wild game. Special teams, Tom, who do you like?
Well, I'm going to stay in that game because it was a hell of a game. Certainly the one that I was most looking forward to watching, and it did not disappoint. But I'm going with kicker Michael Horvat, kicker for McMaster. He finishes 5 for 5 and an extra point for a total of 16 yards. But also in the punting realm, he's got 2 of his 5 punts that are inside the Western 20-yard line. As a kicker, you really don't get thought of unless you're either not doing well or you're doing things very well. And Horvat was on point for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously talked about it going into this week that it wouldn't be a surprise for Mac to be in that game into the half, and I think they stuck in it longer than perhaps we even thought they could, very much on the back or on the foot of Horvat. I'm going to go, and I told you who I was going to give it to, and I realized I should kind of split my special teams player of the week because I'm going to go to the York Waterloo game, and I know I've been seemingly harsh on one Alfred Ole of the York Lions before, just because, yes, the numbers he puts together in his all-purpose yards are gaudy, but he just gets so many attempts at it with how many points York gives up. But hey, you know what? As far as the kickoff return numbers, 203 yards and a long of 110 for that touchdown that opened up that game. But also got a shout out, Justin Sukar getting the punt return touchdown for the Waterloo Warriors. We obviously talked about him and the game he put together in Ottawa last week from the receiving standpoint. Clearly, he's a heck of an athlete. And, I'm excited. I'm really excited to talk about that game as well. God, man, we had a great slate of games to talk about. Those are our picks for Player of the Week. I'm sitting here wearing wrong side there. We're in one of our Player of the Week shirts here, and we'll certainly share a story about this very shirt, or not this exact one, but one that looks exactly like it when we get to UFT Toronto. But we will start off with the afternoon game that we had, where we saw the Carleton Ravens open up their season on the road against the Laurier Golden Hawks. Laurier coming up victorious in this one. Final score, the Golden Hawks 20, the Carleton Ravens 15. Now, Tom, as we said, a lot of our thoughts about pretty much all these games, we missed the mark on a few things. Obviously, we, contrary to the public thought, we aren't perfect, but a number of things we did get right. And in terms of this one, not that it was something we had right, but the biggest comment from the Carleton side of things was, show us who you are. Not too many names that we knew. You mentioned how this is, year 2 in the Corey Grant era here. And I got to say off the jump, though I'm still immensely disappointed that, we still haven't seen a classic Josh Ferguson game in, golly, maybe 2 years now, albeit against a really strong defense in Laurier. I liked a lot of things I saw from the Carleton Ravens team, particularly on offense. And the name, though, I'm not sure who this gentleman is they have listed on the box score. But, contrary to what we thought, who we thought was probably going to be the starter in Tristan Rinaldi, we saw Tristan Lefebvre slinging it out there and looking mighty good. Let's start with the Ravens in this game. Despite the loss, opening up their season, we had so many questions about them. What are your major thoughts about these Ravens? It's only one game, but they're against a top 10 opponent in all of you sports. What are you liking about Corey Grant's Ravens this year?
One of the things that I love the most about this offense is that despite losing Tanner DeYoung, they do not look like they've taken a step back at all. Like, Lefebvre stepped up and he was really impressive. 31 for 45, 310 yards, a touchdown and 1 pick. But being that this is your first real chance starting, and, in the Carleton preview segment of our preview podcasts, we talked about between Ronaldus and Lefebvre, they had like a combined 4 passing attempts last year. Like, it was the Tanner DeYoung show all year long, and rightfully so. He was a fifth-year senior. It was his last year playing. Wanted to give him that. He deserves it. But my goodness, Lefebvre looked great. Now, like you said, I don't know what's happening with that run game. Joshua Ferguson should be up there in some of the elites, and at least in terms of what we've seen previously with the capabilities and the potential that he has. But we're just not seeing it. Now, like you said, complete shout out to that Laurier defense. They are always stout. And like I said before, the front 7 for Laurier oftentimes is the heart and soul of that team. And I think it's the same going into this year as well. But yeah, just was interested that the run game hasn't been there. Now it's only week 1 for them, and I get that. But yeah, Lefebvre looked fantastic. It seemed Ferdinand looks like he's picked up exactly where he left off. He had a whole bunch. He had 12 catches for 100 yards. He was returning kicks. He was doing pretty much anything that they needed to, and he looked really, really impressive. So yeah, I'm very excited about this Carleton Raven offense. They look legit.
And yeah, Ferdinand had a really nice game, and some of the other names that we were familiar with in that skill position group on the receiving end, we're doing their thing too. Hatchie with 4 receptions, Tristan Reddy with 5, Ben Huckabone 2 receptions, and of course the only touchdown that Carleton scored. Now on the Laurier side of things, on the offensive side of the ball, something that was actually brought to my attention by you, Tom, while we were watching it in our own abodes, you had pointed out that no Tanner Nelms in this game. And at first, and Quentin Scott finishes 18 carries, 66 yards. I'll say the line for Taylor Elgersma again, 22 for 32, 198, no touchdowns again. So waiting to see him, throw one in, though he did rush one in for a touchdown from the one, if memory serves. Darian Bassick-Hadden kind of getting the second RB carries for Laurier, but no Tanner Nelms. And how big a factor, and I don't know the extent of the injury, I don't know if you know any more about that, if you were able to find out what his situation was. Quentin Scott, obviously he earned his OUA All-Star last year, undoubtedly, but is this offense as a whole predicated, do you think, on having both of those backs there? Or maybe is this because, we'll talk about the Carleton defense, no doubt, at some point. I thought they were pretty frisky as well. What did you think about the Nelms absence?
Yeah, I think one of the things that Laurier did so well is that the run game is really complemented by the 2 or 3 backs that they normally use. Darian Bassick-Hadden did a little bit of it, but Tanner Nelms is really great at running downhill, hitting the hole hard, and trying to make as much ground as possible, whether that means running over a few guys or not. Quentin Scott is a fantastic runner. He's shifty. He can make some guys miss, but he's not the kind of guy to put his foot in the ground and try to get uphill. He wants to try and get to the edge and try to get to the outside. Now, when Bassick-Hadden went down as well, I'm looking at this game and I'm watching, and there was a couple of times, whether I can't remember if it was a stretch or a toss play, but a couple of times where Quentin Scott has the edge and he's running, and you've got 2 receivers who are out in the field blocking, and there's a lane for him to stick his foot in the ground, cut up field, maybe get hit by a linebacker or something, but to gain some yardage. And instead he tries to rely on his speed, get out to the sideline, and that Carleton defense, you're just about to talk about it, they were fast. They rallied to the ball really quickly. It seemed like the moment that one guy hit, 2 other guys were right there for them as well. So there was really no space to the outside like Quentin Scott was hoping to get to. And I think he would have had more success running if he was more willing to go upfield or downhill in this kind of scenario. And that's why, Tanner Nelms was certainly missed in this run game. Now, Taylor Elgersma, they obviously did their thing. But even that, when I saw them come out against Queens, certainly in the first half, Ethan Jordan, Raiden Thorne, those guys it looked like they picked up exactly where they left off from last year, and they looked seasoned. They looked like they were completely in tune, but there was a lot of uncharacteristic drop balls in this one. I remember a couple specifically with Jordan and Thorne hitting them right in the hands and them just dropping for whatever reason. Maybe they're looking to make a cut. Maybe they were, already presuming that they were going to catch it, whatever. But yeah, I was a little surprised at that. The offense didn't seem to be as clicking as I expect this team to. And it's very shocking that in 8 quarters of overall football, we have yet to see a Taylor Elgersma touchdown pass.
Yeah, and I'm in lockstep with your point about the receivers, and I kind of felt that way in some of the games we saw this weekend, in particular, actually from Western, which was very odd. I mean, we'll get to that game when we get there. I mean, Ethan Jordan with the 9 receptions, only for 58, but I mean, it's hard to not like that. But yeah, when Thorne only finished with 2 catches, I had to squint and look at that. I'm like, that just doesn't feel right. Oja Taleo, another guy that Jack had pointed out for us, having a nice game, and this guy Jackson Stebbings adding in 3 receptions as well. So it's far from. I mean, hey, let's remember, this is a team that's now 2-0, including essentially, I don't want to say stealing, but I'll just use it for lack of whatever the proper word, stealing Queens's, I don't know if Queens is still in the top 10 ranking, but kind of, leapfrogging them a little bit with that win in week 1. And now with this game against Carleton at home, would it have been better if they, we've used that metaphor, don't play with your food. But Carleton, I'm sure for more than just us, no doubt, obviously, these teams have better scouting than we do. We don't really do scouting over here. But I'm certain there was a lot of questions for other teams as well about the Carleton Ravens, with a guy like Fev, as you said, like the combined production of the Fev and Rinaldi being so minimal. It's like, how are you going to plan for these guys? You look at the defense, and yeah, Ife Onyeka had a really nice game in the middle for them. But yeah, so many of these linebackers that were really just on a beeline to cut off those outside rushes that we know Quentin Scott has, made his money on over the years. Really giving Laurier trouble at times. We saw Louis Laveau in that corner having a really nice game. Actually, we should probably give him a lot of that credit for why a guy like, Thorne wasn't as productive as we would normally think he was. No Alamine Shipaloo. I don't believe in that game, sort of who I expect to be the other corner. And if he's out with an injury or just missing for whatever reason, if he comes back, that's such another great addition to that defensive secondary for them. Also, just really quickly from scanning the box score, Grigorchic's interception was 55 yards long. So, hey, at the 55, coming through clutch once again. On the whole, last thought, I guess I'll throw your way, unless you have any other comments about this in general. Laurier picks up the win. A win is a win is a win is a win. We obviously saw a team in Western pick up a win, but kind of leave a bit of a sour taste perhaps in folks' mouth, and we'll talk about all of that when we get there. On the whole, and we've talked about that theme of wins in losses with a couple of the teams that we've talked about, like the Yorks and the Waterloos of the world. I think in many ways, though, this game was there for the winning for Carleton. I think it is, in essence, especially given what everyone expects from Laurier this year, this was a win, so to speak, for Carleton. You're on the road. You showed some really good things. I don't think even Denny Ferdinand was in this game. Talking about another guy that can bolster that defense and bolster their special teams. Was this a bigger win in the loss for Carleton, or a bigger, I'll just frame it for the poetry, a bigger loss in the win for Laurier, where it's like, okay, Laurier, when are you gonna be the thing that we really got excited about? That, because I don't think Mad Jack is wrong when he said, look at the quarterback position, like they got a top 3 guy. Look at the running back, top 3 guy. Look at the receivers, top 3 guys. The D line, across the board, the talent is there. The coaching is there. It's a team that they've had that experience now of having a playoff run, of losing to the eventual champs in Western. So it's that it kind of feels like that progression. Obviously, progress isn't always linear, but that okay, you take that step and you're at least in a Yates this year. Not that we're getting throwing any red flags or whatever. But there is perhaps an argument to say that, I don't know, bigger win in the loss or bigger loss in the win.
I still think that this is a bigger win in the loss. Or sorry,
yeah, the win, like Carleton. We're going thumbs up Carleton.
I'm going thumbs up Carleton. I'm also going thumbs up Laurier here though as well, and I'll get into that. But Carleton, in my opinion, it's one of the most difficult things a part of the regular season to have your bye week 1, because everybody gets that game experience. And we've already talked about it before. Game experience is so much more valuable than practice. I'm not saying that practice isn't, important, because it's incredibly important. But man, when you see live bullets and you are seeing guys from other teams flying around and you don't have the hesitation that, I don't want to hit my own guy as hard or whatever. Once you have that, it just raises your game. It raises the elevation that you can play at. And when you don't have that and you're going up against Laurier, a very good team in Laurier, week 1 for you, week 2 for them after playing a game against Queens and winning one in Kingston, that's a very difficult scenario to go through. I think Carleton did a hell of a job doing that. We already talked about Lefebvre. I think this offense has a lot of upside. The defense really impressed me. I still don't love that their base is a 30 front, but they seem to be blitzing linebackers. They're coming at you from all different angles. They got pressure on Elgersma for sure, so that's credit to them. They obviously were doing some good things here. I'm still, how is that 30 front going to work when you're playing against Western? I don't know. Anyways, the other thing that I was interested in is that there was 3 fumbles in this game. Now, Carleton recovered 2 of them, but Othman Brahm, Kasim Ferdinand, and Alex Gale all put the ball on the turf, and you can't be doing that. You just can't.
I don't remember which of them it was though, but you and me were pretty rapidly on the text after the one that happened deep in Carleton's end, I believe, or they were driving and they were in Laurier's end. And we're like, and it's moments like that where, and there was definitely a couple broadcasts, and I don't put this on the broadcasters, where just the product was poor. I don't know if it was the audio visual, like whatever, where I just would have loved a replay where I'm like, that's an incomplete pass, brother. That that defender made the hit pretty quick. I don't know if there was the proverbial football move made. So from what I got to see just in the moment without a replay, I think it should be 2 fumbles. And man, with how this game ended, who knows how, I mean, that's football, right? I think you had a comment about Laurier and just in terms of being like, no, we're still rolling with the Hawks.
Yeah, so I am still excited about this Laurier team. I think the defense is coming along pretty well here, and I think the offense obviously needs to sort some stuff out. They need to make sure that they're getting everything that they need from in terms of production from the receivers and from their quarterback. That offensive line makes me nervous. A couple more injuries, a couple of, moving parts. When you don't have that symmetry across the line, it can be very, very difficult to be an effective offensive line. So I am a little concerned about that. And, the running game with, I don't know how long Tanner Nelms is out. I don't know if Quentin Scott's going to be the sole runner, but there's a lot of things that are up in the air. The one thing that I will say that I am very excited about this team now is that they are used to winning in close games. That is so huge for teams because you get into a scenario like Western did, honestly, last year. They're going up against Laval. They're in their final drive of the season, but this is the first time that they've been in that scenario. And now you have, there's jitters there. There's whatever you want to call it because you're not used to it. Laurier has come away with 2 very close wins against 2 very good teams here. So the confidence is there and the calmness to go into the fourth quarter, despite being down, if you are down a touchdown, points, whatever, to know, you know what? We've done this before. We've come away with the win. We've held on to the lead. We found a way to get points near the dying seconds here. We can do this again, and consistently doing that against great teams in Queens and what turned out to be a very good looking Carleton team as well.
And not for nothing, you do it on the road and you do it at home as well. And in both games where it's like, you know what, as much as it can sometimes cause consternation in the locker room where it's like, hey, our offense isn't doing what we know they can do, quite to that peak. Like, we really need to see this team start to finish when they get their drives going into the red zone. But just as a whole, I think that is a really good takeaway. And luckily for the Laurier Golden Hawks, whether they have Tanner Nelms back or not, they are taking on the Guelph Griffins next week, so I think their running game will be back in action. I mean, here you get to, for those of you tuning on YouTube, once again, assuming that I got the video to be working, you're seeing here in my abode, I got the 50th anniversary helmet, I got the blankets in the back, the jerseys, the hard helmet. I'm all these photos. I'm all over the place with the mirroring on the screen or whatever, clearly, but we'll get to them briefly. And for Carleton, you mentioned how's that 30 front going to hold up against the Westerns of the world. We will find out next week when they go home to open up their home campaign against those very purple ponies, who are also very much looking to get their running game back on track. So can't wait to see what those games produce. Also shout out to Dawson Hodge, pretty good kicking game for himself, especially in the punting game, a long of 72. I forget how many yards in the air exactly, though he doesn't get the title for longest punt on the day, because that goes to our guy Cole Crossett of the Waterloo Warriors, which is exactly where we're going to next. The KW, where the Waterloo Warriors took out the York Lions to the tune of 53-32. This was an example of one of the games that, while we have Adam McGuire and Jack Moore on the call, as good a duo as you get on the broadcast, the broadcast itself, for whatever reason, was really choppy at times, where sometimes the audio was in front of the video, and it was kind of giving me a little, tripping me out a little bit. But this is a game that we start off, as far as just the scoring and how this goes. Starts off, first play of the game, as we already mentioned, Alfred Olay, the 110-yard kick return. We see James Basiliga then equal it up for the Warriors. A lot of scoring in this game, clearly. And here's the first thing I want to get to. This is where I meant to start with. We talked about how Nolan Caban, he didn't light it up against Ottawa. We know that. That's self-evident. The 4 picks, obviously, it wasn't a great day for Caban. And we had the conversation where you're returning home, you have an opponent in the Waterloo Warriors in the York Lions, where, hey, Lions fans, earmuffs real quick, where, whoever you put at quarterback's going to, lead your team to a victory, assumedly. So maybe you stick with Caban, because if you go and do what they did, you go to Nick Orr, he's probably going to do better than Caban did. Orr finishes, and that's exactly what they did. Orr was the only quarterback we saw here for Waterloo. And you know what? It's worth noting, he only ends up throwing 11 passes. He goes 8 for 11, 204 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Word on the street is that Bertoya brought Nick Orr and Nolan Caban into a room, held up 2 photos of the Basiliga brothers and Evan and James, and said, point. And Caban pointed to Evan, and Nick pointed to James. And he's like, all right, Nick, you're our quarterback, because we throw to James Basiliga, which is exactly what he did. I mean, Basiliga finishes with the 2 catches for the 2 touchdowns, 137 yards. I mean, we know this about him. We know he's a stud. I'm obviously teasing about that story. Mad Jack, going back to him, he was on this call as well. He mentioned something that it seemed like Nick Orr actually had won the game, but was a bit banged up. So maybe Caban starting against Ottawa was a product of that. Kind of all over the place with my intro on that. Obviously, seeing Nick Orr get the start. We saw York score some points, which was kind of neat. What were your thoughts watching this one? It was kind of an exciting game.
It certainly was. Yeah, it started off with an Alfred Olay opening kickoff return touchdown. That's huge, and gives some life into a program that, my God, could use some kind of a win here. I think that, you start off how you do, and it's exciting, and you've got a couple of scores on the board, and you lose both of your quarterbacks to injury in this game. And so you've got... you have to turn to receivers, and you've got to get creative, and you're doing Wildcat, and I just, York has got enough things going against them without having additional things like injuries come back at this. Give these guys a break.
I will say, and I texted you this watching the game this morning, that it actually brought so much joy, genuine, just warmth in my heart on the Olay touchdown. And the York bench, they're going crazy. They're so happy. I'm just like, oh, God bless you, York. God bless you. You're out there trying.
Yeah. I mean, whether this is by design or because they saw an opportunity or what, they obviously, when I say they, Waterloo really leaned on the run here.
Let's talk about the run.
Quentin Springer, 11 attempts, 134 and 2 touchdowns. Anthony Miller, 10 attempts, 110, 1 touchdown. Overall, they had 40 rushing attempts this game, 40 compared to the 11 passes that were thrown. Now, obviously, Nick Orr did pretty well with those. He actually found James Basiliga, as you pointed out, but really heavily leaning on the run here. And maybe that's, going back to Coach Burt. You and I are huge fans of Coach Bertoya. We had the chance to interact with him, whether it's post-career, during their career, but he's a fantastic human being. I wish nothing but the best for him. And maybe this is not only did we beat this team, but we beat them on the ground. Our offensive line was going, our running backs were going. This is a team win, whatever, to try to get some life into this year or the season so far. But yeah, very interested to see that despite making the quarterback change, you only throw the ball 11 times.
Yeah, and you obviously mentioned the 2 top runners in Miller and Springer. Populich Henry, 8 carries for 69 yards. Tal Ibrahim with another 8 carries himself for 62 yards. And hey, maybe that is where they find something of their identity for this year. I'm happy this was a fun game to watch, because we talked about how going into this week that going into this week and actually going back to our preseason pods where we highlighted this as being both these teams, I hope, have this game scheduled or probably circled on their schedule, being fellas, if we're picking up a win this year. And we talked last week about we don't know about Carleton yet. So for all intents and purposes, maybe Carleton is, I don't think they would have had trot out a very meager team yesterday. For us to think that maybe York would have had a shot, less of a stretch of the imagination, and be ooh, maybe Waterloo gives this Carleton team a fight, as I scroll through the schedule to see if they even play each other. But we're looking at this game for these 2 teams. Hey man, all those victories of how you show growth and how you show progress. And we've already talked about a few of the things for both these clubs, where it's okay, hey, that looks all right. good on Waterloo for doing the thing and picking up the victory, because, it was, because York was giving a fight against them. And frankly, it wasn't a fight last year when these two teams did do battle. And I am seeing that Carleton is playing at York, not playing at Waterloo. But, I do think that Carleton, they are playing at Waterloo, sorry. But I do feel that Carleton showed they are certainly are a cut above these two teams. Want to give a shout out. We've talked so much about the Toronto piece of both the York Lions and the U of T Blues, as far as, can you do a better job of retaining some of the Toronto GTA talent on your team? Talked with Jack about how good Laurie is at bringing them in. A guy who is more of a West End kid, I think, he played for the Etobicoke Eagles. I forget where he went to high school, but in Avante McCoy. The numbers as far as the yardage and things like that don't jump off the page. He carries the ball 6 times, gets 26 yards and a touchdown, and he gets 3 receptions for 12 yards and 1 touchdown. But if you stuck with this game until the end and saw that touchdown that McCoy got in the fourth quarter, if you didn't, go find it. And if you did, you know what I'm talking about when I say that was one of the best receiving touchdowns in recent memory. There was obviously that incredible Daniel Oladejo touchdown last year when Ottawa beat Guelph, which arguably, and actually not arguably, he was totally out of bounds, but it was still a sick catch. That's like street ball rules. So it's like, is it out of bounds? Yeah, but that was a sweet play, so it counts. Vontae McCoy goes up the one hand, brings it in. Really happy for that kid doing his thing out there. I don't know. I have no need otherwise than that little shout out, Tom, to say too much else. Any other thoughts that you have about this game we have?
No, I think that, I hope at least that York comes away with this saying, this is exciting. We actually put up 32 points in a game this year when everybody, including us, had them completely written off. Like, yes, Western beats them 83-0, and that's a really big one, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility, because we were calling it, specifically you said, does Western hang 100 on these guys? So the expectation for York is kind of in the dirt this year. So anything that we see from them, whether it's a guy in Alfred Olay who's been a standout for them year after year, or just putting up 32 points in any kind of a manner against any team, something to, at the very least, be happy about. I am interested in this Waterloo team. We'll see what they can do. Maybe Nick Orr is going to be a better option for them than Caban if he's healthy. If this is the guy that starts against Ottawa, maybe that score is different. I don't know, but I think both of these teams have a lot of things that they need to work on in order to get better this year. I'll finish it with that.
And it certainly won't get any easier for these teams, as York is taking their show on the road to play McMaster next week. Waterloo hosting the Windsor Lancers. Oh my gosh, that's let's see that those will be interesting games. I mean, hey, York's got a good recent track record against McMaster. On to the next game, Tom. A game that you and I, Tom, were in attendance for. The Ottawa GGs picking up the victory on the road at Varsity Stadium. Final score in this one: the GGs 15, the U of T Blues 10. Tom, I made the comment to you some point in the fourth, and that was a really interesting fourth because it included that awesome Kinsale Phillip run to bring this game to a 12-10 gap with 13 and a half minutes in the fourth quarter, where almost literally prior to the drive that put that together, where it felt a lot like the Mac Windsor game last week, where purely based on the score, yeah, you know what? This is a close game. Mac could come back. You need one good drive, and if not for that really unfortunate punt return fumble by Jackson Cooling, where Windsor then scores a touchdown. If Mac was it, that game could have gone completely different. And based on what we saw Mac do against Western, hey, you know what? I think despite some of the things and not so nice things we said about the offensive line, which I think were warranted, that is a good team in Mac. And this had a similar feel up until that touchdown where, it's a score and a half difference for Ottawa over U of T. But the way Ottawa was running the ball, which once again, that similar parallel with how Windsor ran it against Mac, like Amilcar Polk takes the ball 23 times and gets 191 yards. My God, Polk, have yourself a day.
Mm-hmm.
It just had that feeling where, yes, it's a close game, a big play, a big drive, which U of T got in that fourth, puts them right back in this game. But Ottawa feels in control, though. What were sort of your feelings about the flow of the game, being at the stadium? It was a great crowd, beautiful evening. It was everything we thought and knew it would be. What were kind of your takeaway thoughts?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, talking about the stadium, you and I pointed it out. We're looking at each other. We're talking during the end of the third, beginning of the fourth quarter, and we're looking around being like, hey, everybody's still here. Nobody left. It wasn't it wasn't a sold out stadium by any means. But the, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 people who were there stayed throughout the entire game, which was awesome to see. The beer gardens were filled with folks, including one Nate Hobbs, who actually made an appearance. We had
but didn't respond to my text when I asked him if he was at the game.
Yeah, he's not the best texter, but I did see him at the game, which was nice. A couple of things that I was interested in with this game, and I'm happy that we got a chance to watch both of these teams live. First and foremost, Ryan Lacandro looks, I know he goes 15 for 25 on 109 yards. He's still working on the chemistry, obviously, between that starting receiving group. And, we talked about it during the game. How many times in training camp did Lacandro actually have a chance to throw to Gendron or Avery or any of his guys that are out there right now? So the chemistry is going to be a little bit off. They have to get that going, and that's only going to take time. But you see this kid in Lacandro being able to flick the ball and go 50 yards down the field. Dude's got a cannon. He stands in the pocket pretty confidently. I was pretty impressed with him. Like I said, he only goes 15 for 25, so there's some miscues there, but it's certainly a future with this kid at running the helm. On Toronto side of things, Kinsale Phillip, he's a special player. That's no breaking news here. We saw that last year. I just don't know about the support he has around him. I don't think that I think if he's got some better blocking, he's actually able to sit back in the pocket a little bit and try to find his guys, or at least if it's a designed rollout where he's not having 2 or 3 GGs directly in his face. I think we see a lot more out of this Toronto team. And in the fourth quarter, when they go down, they score, and Kinsale walks it into the end zone pretty much untouched. I'm looking around like they have a chance here. They get a key 2-and-out stop the next drive, and Toronto gets the ball back. They've got great field position and 2-and-out. And they kick it back to Ottawa. And despite Ottawa not having great field position, and they dealt with this a few times, Amilcar Polk, give him the ball and he rattles off 20 or 30 yards a carry at some points. Like when they really needed Polk, he came through for them, getting them out of the shadows of their own goalposts. So yeah, it was a bit heartbreaking for Toronto, knowing that just a few key plays here or there, and they could have won this one.
Yeah, I'll start with a lot of great points there. I'll start with your comments on Lacandro. I mean, for one, as we both now said, I mean, with the way Polk was running it, it's like, it's a classic Lacandro. Like we'll be in this game on the back of Polk, get us the yards when we need to, and those times that we can take a shot. And man, oh man, the kid is a human jugs machine, and he can take those shots with the best of them. Don't lose us this game, And no touchdowns, but he doesn't turn the ball over either. Pretty efficient on the day as well. And yeah, when Polk's running like that, why would you don't if it ain't broke, right? I give you a ton of credit in talking about this game where we obviously looked at the two known knowns in Phillip and Williams as their QB1, RB1, and being like, neither of you really performed all that well at Guelph. Who's gonna have the bounce back game? And without skipping a beat, you're like, it's Kinsale. Like it's not a flash in the pan, right? What he showed last year, he's returning back home under the lights. And doing it with his feet too, and he's an opportunistic runner. It looked like that touchdown was a designed run for him, and I think maybe they had a draw or two as well. But he wants to throw it. He's there in the pocket. He's efficient with it, and yeah, I mean, obviously, if this were the professional ranks, and maybe, or who knows, maybe there is someone waiting in the wings who's injured, or someone who could step up to give him that help. where, yeah, you know what, it does feel like it would just one more guy, and maybe we're obviously still going to no doubt have some Adam Williams games this year, because once again, I trust in the talent, I trust in what he's done his whole career. And yeah, a guy like Lucas Stoikos can bust out for some major yardage for them, both in the offense as it's designed and returning kicks. But you know, it's close. They feel like there's a lot of good things going on with them, but it's just they still need to put it all together. I don't know Phillips' eligibility. Hopefully, you know, they get another year or two with him to kind of keep building around and sort of see what they can do. Because you hate to see, and we obviously see this from time to time with great programs. I mean, shoot, arguably with the greatest quarterback we've had in a couple of generations in Trey Ford, we saw where the team actually wasn't able to put together much success. So, and with, you know, the guy that paved the way for Phillip here in U of T and Clay Sakara, where similarly the team couldn't put together success. And you know, there's a whole other conversation surrounding that, but they're a fun team to watch. It is, you know, as good, if you are a football fan in the city of Toronto, as good a night out as you can get to go watch U of T do battle under the lights and everything like that. What else on this game? I mean, I obviously, aside from getting to share a lovely game watching with you, Tom, had perhaps my biggest fanboy experience of a lifetime. Do I get to that, or do you have anything else from this game?
Yeah, just one last thing that I wanted to cover here. I want to give a special little shout out to that U of T defense. You know, despite Amilcar Polk going for 191 on the ground, nobody gets into the end zone. They hold this Ottawa team that has a very good offense, in our opinion, to just field goals. No converts into the end zone here, and giving their offense, who struggled the entire game, the feeling that one big play here and we're right in this. I wanted to give a special shout out to that defense, because they kept them into the game. They kept it close, and without them, you know, this could have been game over by like the second quarter kind of thing. But they played their tails off and gave Kinsale and that offense every opportunity to score. So shout out to that U of T defense.
Most certainly. Yeah. Great job on their defense. And from the Ottawa, I still think that Ottawa offense still has a way to grow. I think the potential is there. But moving over to the GG's defense, and you know, they had a really nice game. Once again, I love the talent in that secondary. We saw a really nice game from Kevin Victome. You know, it's once again, like it's easy to, like you said in the Laurier game, you know, it's perhaps too easy, because sometimes the play, much like with the offensive line, the play of defensive backs when they're really on their stuff doesn't necessarily show up on the scoreboard. So it's easy to just be like, oh, did the offense have a bad game? It's like, no. Kevin Victome was all over whoever they put on his side. Eric Cumberbatch had a really nice game. Eli Cruikshank had a really nice game. But we're sitting there, and I'll go back to this shirt that I'm wearing. If you're watching on YouTube, Player of the Week shirt, you know, we still have a couple of them from the batch we cooked up a few years back. And I'm like, you know what, going to a live game, I'll put one in the bag. And yeah, if someone balls out, hand one out. You know, it's a nice way to you know, share the love, to spread the brand, all that good stuff. And we're sitting there probably in the third quarter, early third quarter, whatever it might be, and thinking like, you know, if Ottawa wins this, probably Amilcar Polk, but you know what? Our guy, freaking Harnoor Dhaliwal, also, you know, once again, it's not all over the stats, and he came out for a bit, got a little dinged up, doesn't seem like anything serious. Like, as big a Dhaliwal fan as there is out there, outside of probably his immediate family and just his boys or whatever. But, you know, the game ends and we're trying to position ourselves to where the GGs are going. Obviously, we read the stat line for you already. I mean, golly, Amilcar Polk, very worthy of some swag, very worthy of some shout out with the 191 on the ground. Aren't able to catch him. And we're thinking, all right, you know what? Maybe we'll wait around for a little while, see if someone else comes out, or maybe Polk will come out to do the old like photos on the field with, maybe he has some family there. But we're just standing there, and just walks up to us, none other than our guy, number 43, Harnoor Dhaliwal, gives us a shout out. We really appreciate the love, man. You know, I'm the number one Ottawa GG's fan out here. And, you know, threw him the shirt, gave him some swag. So shout out once again to Harnoor Dhaliwal and that Ottawa GG's defense. Shout out to the U of T Blues. Both these teams, I mean, I think in the case of both of them, maybe, I mean, Ottawa's 2-0, but I think in both cases, still not quite humming at the level that I think we know they can. And frankly, at least for U of T, because for Ottawa, they get their bye week next week. For U of T, it doesn't get any easier because though they're still at home, they're welcoming the Queen's Golden Gales coming off of their bye week. And yeah, that's going to be a tough one for them. But shout out to the U of T Blues, shout out to Varsity Stadium, and with that, we'll go to my apologies, Tom. Yeah.
Yeah, just one last thing. Like you said, shout out to the Varsity Stadium. It is always such a cool atmosphere being in there. But our guy Harnour, honestly, can't tell you enough how much we appreciate that. That one interaction with him just saying, "Hey, appreciate all that you guys are doing for us and for this league." That makes everything worth it. The fact that you and I are talking and there's actually people on the other side who want to listen to us it still kind of blows my mind every time we get an interaction with somebody either in the stands or on Twitter or something. So just wanted to say how much I appreciated that specifically, Harnour. I really thought that he was going to have the catch of the year with that one-handed bat down from Kinsale. I thought he was coming down with that. It obviously didn't end up working out, but yeah, just wanted to give a quick shout out and a thank you for that.
100%. And shout out to Ken Waller as well. Let's move on to the penultimate game of the night. Oh boy, this game. The Windsor Lancers move to 2-0 on the season when they take out the Guelph Griffins at home. Final score, Windsor 41, Guelph 18. We talked about this a little bit with, me kind of shouting out Randall Beardy, the offensive line coach, and then you doing a glorious job listing them all by name and what they did, rushing the ball, the 488 total rushing yards, which is just you know what? Once again, despite all the decor of my room, Guelph, you're on timeout. Guelph, go sit in the corner, man. Go... No, you don't. Come on, man. You don't like seeing that. But you know what else you don't like seeing is Guelph, or perhaps the man making the decision on the quarterbacks back on his bullshit, switching up the QBs, man. Hey, I liked Marshall McRae in that first game as the short yardage guy, had some good runs, and he ran the ball pretty well as again when he was in a quarterback. But golly, man, you know what? That was talk about a red herring of a game when they beat U of T at home, I guess, because I don't know what to say. Let's get our Guelph comments out of the way because this should be a strictly Windsor Lancer appreciation section of the pod. Tom, I do want, you got word of perhaps some injury updates with the Guelph Griffins defense, and that's obviously where we had some promise and some thought that could be the what really holds them together as far as where they could find success and where they did seemingly find success against Ottawa. So what is it that what can you share about Guelph's defense?
Yeah, well, the biggest piece of information here is that they were without Anthony Martuzzo for this game, who was the defensive player of the week last week. I don't know if it was something lingering from the Toronto game, if he gets injured in practice, but losing him for this game is huge. But another side of things, which is positive, is that the Scott Murray injury that we heard about, we were initially thinking that it might be a season ending. I've got confirmation that it's not season ending. Hopefully he'll be back in the next few weeks or so, but having him come back to that defense is going to be huge for them. Cole Watson, their second leading tackler last year, hopefully should be back as well. So this defense should only get better. But man, once again, we see, despite all of the players that they have, even without Martuzzo on there, Josh Campbell, Curtis Woodmansey, Yusuf Khalidi on the defensive line, Brandon Farrago in the backfield, despite all of those fantastic players, Windsor is still able to run. Now, obviously, they've got unbelievable running backs in Christopher John and Joey Zorn, and even Wegbe Mumbo runs off, and that's a three-headed monster now, which is insane. And also, I can't remember who it was because I had it here. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Yeah, Bretton McDougall for these Windsor Lancers. you have to give your number 5 up to Mumbo, because Mumbo number 5 needs to happen. I want to hear that on a call. Just wanted to quickly shout that out.
I mean, he does wear he wears 32, and you add those numbers together, and you do get 5 that way, I suppose. But I'm in full agreement.
But yeah, they shout out to those 3 fantastic running backs, obviously, and Liam Talbot does his thing as well, and a lot of success on the ground. But man, past couple of years, Guelph has not been able to stop the run consistently, and it's a big problem in the OUA, which the entire league, like we talked about, because of the Western influence, is a run-heavy league.
I don't get it. I don't get it. Because as you listed off, like the talent is there. And, I hate to chalk it up maybe to something. So, and I don't want this to come across as a shot at any of the players per se, but I feel like similar, like, former offensive lineman. Maybe, have we mentioned that before, Tom, that we used to play offensive line? I don't know. Did we ever talk about that?
Maybe a couple of times.
Shout out to the people sitting near us at the U of T game. Well, they got a clinic on us, like talking about the like minutia of like different footsteps and like our favorite ways to run, like counter, power, and all these things. And we're joking about putting together some content, very, very heavy just on the offensive line stuff. But like there is something to playing offensive line, and I'm sort of using this as a point of comparison. Talk about stopping the run. Where when you talk about we want to run the ball as an offensive line, there's scheme, there's talent, there's all these things, but that's a mentality. That's saying that like you are going through that man in front of you, that you are going to dominate the trenches. That was always, and actually in the setup I have here, you can kind of see him in the background, Matt Nesbitt there on the wall there, my old center, and of course the offensive line coach now at Queens, where that was our breakdown. It was dominate on 3, and that's that mindset. And I have to imagine that as much as stopping the run as a defense, there's the scheme, there's the talent, there's just that mindset. And I'm not trying to say that these players, and you mentioned guys like Curtis Woodmansey and Joshua Brown, who just like, as far as like your 2 defensive tackles, like it's hard to get better than those guys, you'd think. And so I'm not trying to take this as a shot at them. And guys like Ferrigo as well, kind of cleaning things up. And you're missing more Tuzo, and it sounds like Christian Stewart, we're not going to see him, even if we do get Scott Murray back. But like, come on, like you just have to, at some point, you have to say, no, you will not run the ball on us. Like, obviously easier said than done, but I do feel like there's a bit of a mentality thing, though. Of course, like I said, I don't want that to come off as saying that there's any sort of deficiency from the attitude of these Griffins on defense. But it's just I don't know what to chalk it up to. It's not like when we talk about Carleton, where it's like maybe don't run a 3 down front and teams won't run all over you. Still yet to be seen, because as we talked about, they did a pretty good job of slowing down Laurier. But it's certainly mystifying. Maybe you have other thoughts on that, but we shouted him out for his performance last week, though of course not touching what Hillock did, and certainly though a bit more of a proficient performance this week, still doesn't touch what Hillock did. But Danny mother frickin' Skelton, dude, holy heck, this guy. I mean, we kind of have we have our moments of laughter when we look at some of Hillock's lines, where it's like last week I think it was like 15 for 18 and he picks up however many hundreds of yards he gets. Skelton goes 18 for 21, 189, 2 touchdowns, and not for nothing, he also picks up 59 yards on the ground. And he operates, and hey, who wouldn't behind that offensive line with those running backs and with the talent he has at receiver? I think we mentioned him last week, but Colby Ginn or Ginn, who I believe is that receiver, and obviously Windsor gets a lot of talent from the States, but new to the program. Who wouldn't be confident when you have all those guys around you, and JP the Don calling things up? But he has such a swagger when he has the ball. Like, we need to, maybe we'll set this up for our next pod. Like, we need to have a serious conversation of like, where is he in the ranks of best QBs right now in the OUA? Not about potential, not about who are these guys, because so far this year, he's ahead of Elgersma. Mm-hmm. He's had a better season than Taylor. I love Taylor, but just a straight production. Do I think Taylor's career, and do I think this year maybe he finishes ahead of him? It totally could be the case. Wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. Put him ahead of him. Keegan Hall, despite the 0-2 record, we've talked about all the things we've loved about him. Absolutely, you put Skelton ahead of him. And then after that, it's like, okay, you got Hillock. is Danny Skelton the second best quarterback right now doing this thing? And obviously, with Queens with Vreeland, we've only seen one game, and he didn't score. He had the one passing touchdown, I believe. Danny Skelton might be the second best quarterback in the OUA right now.
I don't think that's a hot take. One of the things that, I had a chance to obviously watch this game, and the OUA stream, once again, giving us a lot of headaches for this one. But what I will say with Danny Skelton here is I loved his decision-making. The fact that he went 18 for 21 is a big shout out to that. But when he took off to run, he finishes, like you said, with 59 yards on the ground, and he found holes. He utilized the capabilities that he's got with his legs, not to do anything flashy, but to sprint up the field and to make sure that he was gaining yards when he needed to and doing anything he could for this team. Like, I loved everything that I saw from this kid. He looked confident in the pocket. He looked very much like he is the leader on that team, despite having Christopher John, despite having Joey Zorn, all of these amazing playmakers. They all look to him as that quarterback. And yes, that's a natural thing because, the quarterback's the one who calls the play in, but it's very easy to tell with certain teams where that quarterback doesn't have that same level of command in the huddle versus others. You can see it when people run out after the huddle, when they run up to the line. Are they set immediately? Are they looking around? Do they still have questions? Whatever. And that goes back to coaching, and the Don has done a hell of a job with this Windsor Lancer team. It is so amazing to see. But man, Danny Skelton, he has been one of the most impressive parts of this offense, and he's got 3 different running backs here who went for over 100 yards.
It's incredible. We talked about some of those missing guys on this defense for Guelph. They obviously didn't have nearly this amount of production as a totality as their offense did against Mac last week. But that's a really good Mac defense, and we'll certainly talk about them very soon. I am, obviously you and me at Ron Joyce, I'm sure you still have my voice ringing in your ear of going, why did I not pick Windsor? But man, do I feel bad and I think that we moved them down from the tier when we're like, they're there with Ottawa and Laurier. Bad job by us.
No. That's on me. I was the one who made that call. I convinced you into it. I also convinced you to go Mac over Windsor in week 1. It's all on me. I should have been more bullish. I should have been higher. I should have had my expectations as high as possible for this Windsor team because my God, have they met them.
Well, I accept your apology, Tom. It is all your fault. Windsor. Oh man, I'm this team, and they're fun to watch. They run the ball. Skelton's doing his thing. That defense, like I said, the way that they were shutting down. I mean, Guelph gets some production of. Obviously, we talked about we have mentioned, I guess, the fact that yes, Isaiah Smith wasn't back in this game for them. Donovan Malloy, 114 yards, like nothing to sneeze at. But of course, as I very much learned from being on the pod with Eddie back in the day. Along a 75, and not that, any just, Joe bag of donuts off the street can get a 75-yard carry in an OUA football game. But as far as that 114, so a nice game for him, I suppose, in that regard. And McCrae picking up 70 yards once he went into the game as well. But man, we're a few more weeks away. And how many weeks in specific from Windsor playing Western? September 30th. By the end of this month, whoever, regardless of who wins that game, but obviously a bit dependent on how that game goes, obviously nonetheless, come October, we're going to have some very interesting conversations, I think, about these Windsor Lancers. I'm sure they're over there, if they're listening to this, being like, we don't care. And we're already having those conversations here. And hey, Laurier, you can go on all your 519 whatever sports and talk about how it's Vanier and bust. And we're just going to be doing our thing out here in Win City, eating our McDonald's with the Don and just being like, all right, don't talk about us and doubt us, whatever you need to do. We're just going to keep doing our thing. We don't, we don't talk it. We go out there and win. Oh, I love the Lancers. Somewhere in here, I know I have a Lancers shirt. I'm going to get on for the pod next time now that we're on the video. Any last thoughts on this game? Tom?
Yeah, I got to make the trip down to Windsor and pick up some Windsor swag, man. I am. We joked about it last year, but man, this team is impressive. The one thing I did want to call out, you and I were very critical, let's say, of the McMaster offensive line, and deservedly so. Uh, this Windsor defense, very legit, but Guelph gives up 8 sacks in this game. That Guelph offensive line has got some issues. Tommy Barakis, their starting left tackle, goes down with an injury. I think he was out for the rest of the game, so that's a big loss there. But, you know, anytime you get a new offensive coordinator, a new offense coming into play, obviously the pieces around need to change, whether you like to run certain plays a little bit more effectively. I think some of the biggest pieces in terms of players that change is the offensive line, depending on the style of running that you want to do. When you think about the offenses that you guys had when you were playing, and obviously you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I remember sleek, athletic dudes who were ready to run, ready to do, like, if you were going into hurry up offense, yes, everybody's breathing heavy, but at no point in time did I look over and see the Guelph offensive line huffing and puffing because they couldn't do things. And I think that's a call out to the style of offense you guys did, where you were doing a little bit of stretch, but a lot of outside plays, inside zone, things of that nature, where you have to be able to move properly. When you get into a little bit more power running, sometimes you can get like guys who are a little bit bulkier because it's man on man, you're hitting hard. Not to say that Guelph is really a heavy power run team this year, but I have seen the offensive line be a little bit bulkier. They're bigger dudes on this Griffin O-line, and I think for the most part, once they get their mitts on you, it's very difficult to get out of that. But if you've got the right level of speed and strength to kind of get around that, you might see some success here, as we saw with Windsor in this past game. So it's just something to note here. It's a different style of offensive line for this Guelph Griffin team, and they've got to figure out some kind of a method here to make things work. Now, I will say that Tristan Aboud, he is still a first-year player. When he was in there, he's got to have that internal clock. There was a couple of times where I saw him get sacked, and he's holding on to the ball for 5 seconds. At some point as a quarterback, you got to think, at least I should be getting 2 to 3 seconds from my O-line bare minimum. But once you hit that 4-second mark, you got to make a decision where you're taking off or you're throwing the ball. It's unrealistic to ask your O-line to block for 5 seconds or more on a lot of these plays. Great offensive lines do it, but that's the standard here. And, they need to get on the same page, whether it's the style of, offense that you're calling here, or if that just means, you're doing a little bit more match protection, slide protection, or whatever, to get a little bit more from your 2 quarterbacks here, whether you're going with Tristan Aboud or Marshall McRae, who can both move, so who would benefit from some sprint out or some slide pro. That's my O-line piece.
Yeah, no, I mean, I certainly hear what you're saying, and the way that, and we talked about this a little bit, doing our old memory lane thing where we were at the U of T game, where when we used to play you guys, when Greg Knox was calling up your defense, it was the biggest headache, because in contrast to playing the Westerns of the world, where you just know, like, hey, this is a straight fist fight, and kind of going back to that mentality, I don't need to think all that much on the line. I just need to fly off the ball and punch you in the mouth as hard as I can. When you were playing those Knox defenses, and obviously you would have faced them in practice as well, you coming right down to the last moment and having to think and make all your calls, but then also the way guys are flying around and you're on your double, and now I got to come off this way, or no, you're going that, and just the way that Windsor defense not only can out physical you, but the way they're scheming them up, putting them in positions to have success. And yeah, the way that this offensive line does look like a little bit more of a just like put your hand in the dirt, just get ready to try and run this guy over. Perhaps a bad matchup there. Shout out to Kaladi Amusen picking up 3 of those. It's showing 7 sacks here, 7 or however you spin it. Bad day for the Guelph offensive line, though. Obviously, as you said, Aboud needs to take some of the credit for that, or some of the responsibility.
8 tackles for loss, 7 sacks.
We are nothing if not accurate in everything we say on this podcast. But we mentioned how Mac fared against this Windsor defense, especially on that offensive line, and taking us to that last game, they kind of looked They looked all right. Final score. They look pretty good. Final score out of London: the Western Mustangs 34, the McMaster Marauders 22. So I think this is where we were perhaps the most on point, I think, with what we were thinking about with these games. We said something to the effect that wouldn't be surprised if we're sitting in Varsity Stadium being like, hey, this game's close. And it was more than close, with Mac leading at times and me cursing to myself that if Mac does win, then I might just need to like shut down the pod forever. And like, it's official. I just don't know anything that Mac can take advantage or can capitalize, can improve on some of those deficiencies on the O-line by moving the pocket a little bit, having Hall use his athleticism intentionally. And boy, is he good at moving, squaring his hips, and just getting that ball out quick when he needs to. But my biggest takeaway watching this game, and I'm not, similarly we talked about with Laurier, that notion of, this very much feels like that game where we can have that discussion, and maybe we'll have it right now off the jump before we get into the details and go through the flow of the game, of a win in the loss for Mac and a bit of a loss in the win for Western. And for me, there's two things that stand out. I'll start on the Western standpoint. For one, like we said at the beginning, Keon Edwards had 23 yards rushing the ball in this game. Only on 9 carries. I mean, Hillock throws it 39 times. Hall was throwing it 55 times. I mean, that's partly what made this such a fun game to watch. And that would, as great a time as we had at U of T, we would have just been over the moon if we were there at Western Alumni Stadium. They packed that place as well. Looked like it was a great time there. But Keon, obviously not the production we're used to. And I'll set up the offensive line question, but I'll leave that to you to perhaps get your thoughts on it. But more than that, and it is partly involved with the offensive line, just an overall sloppiness that you certainly need to give Matt credit for forcing perhaps some of those errors and some of that, hey, we need to tighten the screws if we're Western. And I mean, we're sitting right now, it's just about 3 p.m. on Labor Day Monday right now. The game was last night at the time we're recording this. I'm certain those Mustangs are still running sprints right now, or doing whatever kind of morning after conditioning they're doing, because they also had 11 penalties in this game. Like, this was a very un-Western game for so many reasons. The sloppiness and the fact that they didn't have really any rushing production. It kind of felt like this was the bizarro Western Mustangs. They still pick up the win. We can talk about all those positive things in the loss for Mac, but I kind of set the table talking about Western, and obviously some of those questions on the offensive line. What were some of your thoughts watching Western in this game? We obviously thought it could be close, but I don't think we thought it was going to look like it did at times in this one.
Yeah, certainly. A lot of, I don't know if this was uncharacteristic Western or if I've just got my rose-colored glasses on and I'm thinking how well that Mac did.
Maroon-colored glasses, if you will.
My maroon-colored glasses, great call out. One of the things that I was most impressed with was actually the first drive that McMaster has. So Western starts with the ball. They go 50 yards in 8 plays. They kick a 32-yard field goal. They open up the scoring. Mac immediately takes it from their own 25 and goes 75 yards in 10 plays in 5 minutes and looks pretty impressive doing so, and finishes with a score. Keegan Hall finding Jacob Patton in the end zone. And I go, oh my goodness. What? Where was this last week against Windsor? It could have been so much different, but they looked really impressive. That McMaster offensive line looked fantastic against a very good Western team. I think they only gave up 1 sack. Now, obviously, there was a bunch of hurries, and I think Keegan got himself out of a couple of sacks as well, but still, like, a marked improvement from what we saw last week. And I think the more that we start talking about this, the more we start thinking of, like, maybe this is less McMaster really improved and more so, oh my God, Windsor is actually that good kind of talk. Anyways, we already talked about the Lancers. But yeah, some uncharacteristic things from Western. Yes, Keon Edwards only finishes with 29 yards, and that's mind blowing. But like the game plan going into this seemed very much Western. We're going to come out throwing here. Evan Hillock does this thing. He looks really impressive in doing so. But yeah, it didn't seem like a stereotypical Western Mustang team. They ultimately came away with the win here, but yeah, lots of questions here that I did not expect to be seeing after at the end of this one.
And I mean, I love that you sent me the screen grab of that Eric Anderson pancake.
Ooh,
Shout out to you, Eric.
My God, Eric Anderson, that was beautiful.
But it does and going back to the comment that you had made and we talked about a bit in that Guelph Windsor game, with not just perhaps Windsor's being better in the trenches against Guelph's O-line, but also just schematically how they were giving them trouble, where it didn't feel like at times I was just seeing the Western O-line lose one-on-one matchups. And I'm not concerned in the long run, because this is a new offense. This is almost a completely brand new offensive line, aside from Eric Anderson being there. And as you said about Carleton and the tough thing about not facing the live bullets, where in some regards did Western really face live bullets? It was more like bullets coming out of a Nerf gun, if you will. And that's partly why I'm not that terribly perturbed with some of the things. The penalties, that still bugs me. But it was things where guys are on there was plays wrapping up where there's a guy getting tackled in the backfield and you're still like Keon getting racked up in the backfield, or Yazbek or whomever, and you're seeing two offensive linemen still on a single defensive lineman pushing them, and it's like, okay, but like, where was the communication on getting that second level linebacker? And we've talked about it even coming off that Windsor game, that we both really love this MAC defense, mostly in the secondary, but there's obviously a lot of talent in the front seven as well. I think Mitchell Price had a really good game battling against those Hoggies. So I do think that like in a couple weeks, that O-line playing together a bit more, and you obviously shared that great story about as a recruit there and that expectation that they have, where it's like, I don't care if you're our all Canadian starting whatever, or if you're our rookie eighth man on this O-line, you better know what you're doing in all situations. But as we've also talked about, just having been in these positions, there is that gelling that takes time. And this is a very new offensive line. So I'm not terribly concerned about it from that standpoint, so to speak. But it's not a red flag. It's like a very soft, like almost, it's a salmon. It's kind of like, oh, that's nifty. What's that doing there? What's that supposed to mean? Am I supposed to feel concerned, or am I just kind of like, we just need a little attention? I think they'll gel together. I mean, hey, it's still such a pleasure watching Eric Anderson do his thing. What is your feeling about this offensive line? On the whole, I don't think it, like, no matter how much they gel, it's certainly not going to be as good as that offensive line was last year. I would be blown away, because that was a stellar offensive line.
Yeah,
do you read it the same way as me, or are you a bit more concerned?
No, I think you nailed it there. The one thing that I did want to call out was a shout out to the McMaster defense. I think a lot of times they were in a 50 front to really show, what, we are going to dominate and make sure that you're not rushing for as much as you want to, but they're sending additional pressure. Like I saw multiple times where they're sending 5 or 6 man pressure, trying to get after Evan and try to make him make some mistakes here. Now, I think that the pass plays, or just the offensive plays in general, that Western is running is very much designed to be, yes, we're trying to go downfield. Yes, whatever the goal is for this particular play, but there's always an outlet pass. There's always somebody who's in the flats, or somebody who's just doing a quick slant or something, so that Evan's got something of a, I'm about to get hit here, let me just toss something out. And Evan did a great job of, when he didn't have that, trying to run out of the pocket and just throwing balls away so that he's not taking the sacks. But credit to this McMaster defense. They were getting after Western, sending pressure, sending things. And maybe ultimately that's kind of what led to their demise a little bit. And we see Mohsen Jamal here go off. just as I'm pulling up his stats, he finishes with 7 catches, 173 yards and a touchdown, including a 96-yard bomb, which Max sent pressure. He's one-on-one, beats one man, and just turns on the Jets, and now he's gone kind of thing. So it's a little bit of honestly where we came into play when we did beat Western, and I'm thinking back specifically to 2014. It was all, I think, almost every single defensive play plus one pressure, trying to get to Will Finch. Same thing here, trying to get to Evan Hillock, trying to make sure that he's uncomfortable in the pocket, that he's not doing the things that he wants to do. Now, even despite that, and yes, they did get some pressures, that Western offensive line did pretty well for the most part. I think obviously they would have liked to have run the ball a lot better when the opportunities that they did have. And I think that's more of a credit to this McMaster defense more than anything. But Evan pretty consistently had time in the pocket. There was a few times where he got hit, like I said, but he was still able to sit back there. You don't become the back-to-back offensive player of the week with having a crappy offensive line. And I think you nailed it. They lost so many unbelievable players, and I don't think that we really understood how unbelievable that offensive line for Western was last year. But yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer. It's still guys getting live bullets, still understanding some few things. And most importantly, yes, is Marshall pissed? 100%, because I think he's just always pissed, but at least he's pissed and you're still 2-0.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, once again, even as you said, like some of the pressures, like it's less of like they got the win. That's what matters. Just win, baby. Could they have done better in a number of fronts? Absolutely. The way, like, once again, when you watch the game, and the one thing that is nice about going back and watching it on the replay is that you can watch the play and then be like, oh, hold on a second. I want to, oh, that didn't look good. You know, like when you just watch the game live, and especially when you're at the game live, it's kind of like something went right or something went wrong, but the details of it are very vague. But even I remember Hillock might have even got the ball out. Maybe it was the time, I think he got sacked once or twice. Either way, on one of the pressures, and he took a big hit where it was, you could tell, I don't think it was Keon in at running back, but there was just some confusion where Max sent that pressure you're talking about, right tackles on his guy, and then it looked like the running back thought he was taking the same, where once again, you ended up with 2 guys on one, and then a free rusher coming from the linebacker position, where once again, do I think they'll clean that stuff up? Absolutely. But it's un-Western like, where it's just we've seen them in games, we've seen them lose where it's a team just saying, hey, we'll throw our best punch, you throw your best punch. It's less when we see Western get in trouble. When we see Western get in trouble, which is rare enough of an occasion, it's rarely, if ever, happens where they get kind of outfoxed. Mm-hmm. You know, outboxed, but never outfoxed. But am I overall that concerned about it? Definitely not. These are still the Mustangs. I do really like some of those positive things coming from the master side of the ball, though. Mm-hmm. And man, oh man, like, you know, we obviously talked about Danny Skelton and everything he's done right now, and that 2-0 record next to his team versus the 0-2 next to Keegan's is certainly a part of the story and why you give the nod to Skelton undoubtedly. But for you know, put aside some of the reps Hall was able to get last year for a guy who's in his first year out the gates starting at QB, the trust they obviously have in him, and the, you know, some of the same kind of adjectives and themes we talked about Skelton with this, the confidence, the moxie, whatever, you know, words you want to use, you love to see it. For this team to reach their full potential, do we need them to establish a run game? Certainly. But clearly that wasn't their expectation in this one when they threw out for 55 yards. Pardon me, threw out for 55 attempts in this one. I don't know, Tom, final thoughts on this one?
Yeah. You talk about the fact that they've got total confidence in this kid. Over 2 games, Keegan Hall has thrown the ball 92 times. So, yeah, I think they've got a lot of confidence here. I think that also might be a little bit of, we don't have a ton of confidence in our offensive line to really run the ball. A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. The one thing that I am a little concerned about, and maybe this is a combination between the way that Keegan Hall plays and also some of the experiences that he's had, but I saw a few times where Western gets a bit of pressure, but it's one guy who's maybe he's bull rushing the offensive lineman back. The offensive lineman still has him. But because there's any kind of pressure, Keegan doesn't feel comfortable to step up into the pocket and remain there. He's taking off and he's running, even in times that he doesn't necessarily need to. And now, as an offensive line, you don't have your guys. Everybody's running after him, and he gets into those situations. Now, Keegan Hall is a hell of a quarterback, and I think he's an incredible athlete as well, and he's able to make plays when he's on the run. But I'm just concerned that is the amount of times that he got hit in that Windsor game influencing him in terms of where is he playing now? Is he concerned about getting hit? He just wants to get out of the pocket so that he can start making some things work. Is that just who he is as a quarterback? Kind of up in the air a little bit, and I am a little concerned with that. The other thing too, we talk about a Western team that was playing a little sloppy here. How about the opportunities that this freaking McMaster team had to win this game? Not just be in it, but win it. But it goes back to the same things we talked about at Windsor. We talked about all last year, being able to convert. How many times? Look, Michael Horvat, shout out to him. He obviously gets the special team player of the week. He kicks 5 field goals. You need to convert those. If you convert 1 touchdown, this game is completely different. And I think it starts with what I saw a ton. I can't count how many times McMaster is in second and long. You have to win first down, and that means gaining at least 4, 5, 6 yards on first down, so you've got second and manageable, and you're able to do something with it. In second and 10, second and 8, the playbook that you have is so limited, and you don't have the capabilities to do exactly what Western was doing in the terms of the outlet receivers that Keegan can just kind of dump off to the flats or something. You can't do that on second down because you gain 5 yards and you're in a punting situation or you're kicking a field goal. You have to win first down, and that's the one thing that I did not see from this McMaster team consistently enough.
And the thing that is frustrating, certainly for McMaster fans and alumni like yourself, is that the offensive line piece and the difficulty finishing are things that we were talking about a year ago on this podcast. And that's what really is no doubt frustrating for a fan base, for a coaching staff, for the players, of course, is that when you're making the same mistakes, right? Though something else we didn't see in this game that I didn't clock watching it, but just going through the box score, and I haven't gone through the participation list, was no Daniel Bossett, who's certainly not only an asset in the running game, but you talk about a guy that is an outlet where even if Keegan is breaking out of the pocket, though you might like him to stay in, he's a guy where you can have that little easy flick of the wrist, gain 3 or 4, don't take the hit type situation. So I don't remember if we saw him got hurt. Don't know that situation, but that would certainly be a boon for the Marauders moving forward. And going into next week, they return home to take on the York Lions. And we'll obviously talk about that game in more detail at the end of the week when we set up week 3. But despite all the things we talk about with York, and obviously I tease when I talk about York getting the win last year, and we obviously know the reason why, I do think about a guy like Jason Janvier Messier at that defensive line spot for the Lions, where we'll talk about it more on Friday or whenever we record it, but you'll hear it come out on Friday or whenever you listen to these podcasts. Just God bless you for listening in the first place. I think got to set the line for him, 2.5 sacks over under, I think, in that game. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. As we mentioned earlier, Western hitting the road to take on the Carleton Ravens next Saturday. It's the nightcap of week 3. I don't believe I mentioned the games after the Windsor Guelph game, though I'm sure we mentioned them in passing. But just to kind of catch up on that. Guelph, of course, returning home off of that loss at Windsor to take on Laurier, a game that we're very interested in, and Windsor heading back on the road to take on the Waterloo Warriors. But I guess that's a wrap for it. Tom, we did it. How you feeling? First time, once again, assuming that I haven't bungled it up as far as the video component of this. First time on the YouTube stream. Hopefully people are enjoying what they're seeing. Hopefully people are enjoying the OUA season. I won't say as much as us because I don't know if that's physically possible, but how you feeling wrapping this one up?
Oh, I am so excited for this OUA season still. Seeing these games that going into this season, did I think that McMaster Western was going to be as close or as exciting as this, or that we would see a Windsor Lancer team by week 2 become a serious contender for a potential Yates Cup run. No, I didn't. And all of these different things, I'm so happy to have OUA football back. I'm going to enjoy every single second that I possibly can. And hopefully, if everything works out and you're able to actually see us on YouTube here, you can tell how genuinely excited Zach and I are talking about this. You know, the players that are here, the quality of the game that's here, having the coaching staffs like the Don, JP Cercelli, and all of these people. Like, my God, is this just a fantastic time to be an OUA football fan.
And you got to watch us go an hour and a half straight, no edits, no cuts, just pure, unfiltered, unadulterated OUA football talk. And you know what? Like, did we expect some of these things to happen in the early throws of the season? Absolutely not. We're not that clairvoyant, but it is really nice that the season does kind of get broken up into the 2 months for the regular season. It's September, figuring out who these teams are, and then October, seeing them kind of take advantage, capitalize, and make those runs toward the playoffs. So we kind of talked about how the Windsor conversation when we hit October 1 might get really interesting. That goes the same for all these clubs as we get more information about them, see them sort of take shape, and see what they have to offer us through this 2023 season as we motor along. But that's week 2 in the books. We have a beautiful slate of football games coming up next weekend for week 3, and you'll hear us and watch us talk about those next time at the 55.